encouragement, which enables you to endure the same sufferings that we suffer. Our hope for you is firm, for we know that as you share in the sufferings, you also share in the encouragement. Amazingly, I had chosen these pictures before I read the readings for today, but to me, there are so many different connections you could make. So, what is one that you?
Well, it's this ability of giving students a sense of the purposefulness or the reason why suffering matters in life. You know, and this whole idea of our suffering is your suffering, and our suffering is Jesus' suffering, and Jesus walks with us.
How do the pictures match that?
Well, for me, this is Cologne 1946. I don't know, I'm just making up. This is Assad 2017. It's the same human suffering. It's, you know, there's a time for war, there's a time for peace, and it plays out over and over again. And it affects real people.
Mrs. Pike, will you say again what you had talked about with the picture, the first picture? What did you hope it was? I didn't mean to do that.
I said it looked like despair in the foreground and hope
Yeah.
in the background.
Did you notice anything related to that in the reading that we just read? That
Oh,
I just
yeah.
read?
The
As
last
a
two
matter of
lines.
fact, when I was listening to you do the reading and I was looking at the second picture, I wanted to be the encouragement for this poor person and go out and offer that to him, because he
Yes.
looks like he needs a happy face.
Yes. So, what makes you think he looks like he needs a happy face?
The same reason that Dan thought the kid looked fine.
Yes.
The posture and how he's walking, and he appears a bit, his shoulders are drooped, he's looking down.
Yes. And yet.
Probably trying not to walk into that wire that he's about to walk into.
Yes.
I can make up a story about anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Clearly, which is great. It's a good skill for an English teacher to have.
One of the things, Caitlin,
Yes.
I do in a literature class is for any significant work that we've read, try and get students, and the answer might vary from student to student, but to pull out what's the lingering image that stays with you, that you know you'll remember 10 years after you've put this book aside, right?
Yep.
So, for example, we had a really good discussion about To Kill a Mockingbird, and one of those lingering images was when Mr. Cunningham bends down in the lynch mob, puts his hands on Scout's shoulders and says, "I'll tell him you said hey." And it's different than the way it's filmed in the movie, so students who have that image, it's created from the book. And then to be able to take students and say, well, what do you see? How does it look like? And they don't have this, they just have this.
Right.
But if they can create that,
Yes.
you know, it helps break open the novel for them.
Yeah. Yep. And practice with this and observing details in these helps them to be able to do that just from the spoken word that comes in, either through listening or through writing, or through reading. If you turn to the back of the visualization handout, the one that has all the text on it, it has a summary of visual thinking strategies. That's the approach that I was just showing you. I went to a 5-day workshop on it years ago. I mean, we went 5 days just doing things like what I just did and all kinds of variation. So there's so much more that you could do with it. But you also don't need much more training if you actually just stick with getting the students to be the ones talking and getting them to support their points verbally, which takes a little work to pull it out of them at first. And that's where the more training can help. But you could do it. The question, look down that worksheet to the part where it just says the 3 questions that you ask. It's extremely simple. What is going on here? Thanks. What's going on in this picture? What do you see that makes you say that? What more can we find? Just keep exploring deeper and deeper and deeper. Yes?
The hard part, and which it doesn't matter the age level, because when we, same thing in workshop, we worked with elementary kids all the way to adults.
Yep.
And even the adults were hard to bring back on focus and task due to whether it be Warner Pike or whoever else is like fighting back and forth. No, I see this, I see this. You bring them back with what more can we find now? And then you also
I can do that too.
reiterate from everything. You bring that focus back to the picture, which is nice, is having a visual
Yes.
so everybody takes off the people to
Yes,
Right
here's
back.
the image that's our focus,
Got
which can be, it doesn't just have to be this kind of image.
Nope.
So one that there's so many things I wanted to do with you today that there isn't time for everything. But these are pictures from a science textbook on different kinds of leaves. And you could basically get students to draw almost all the conclusions in this part of this chapter by just observing the different pictures of the leaves really closely.
And no,
So,
it's not cannabis either.
That's what he just said. That's what he
I
just
knew
said.
nobody would say that. One, I knew what he was thinking, and two, I heard you say it.
Yeah.
Keith, let me get a close-up.
oh yeah, does that start recording?
That'll do it.
Keep going, Caleb.
Okay, so here we go. This
That's
picture
an
I'm just gonna
oak
very
leaf.
briefly show you is
Oak
from an
leaf.
article about using visual thinking strategies. This is from a study where elementary school students were studied, but also, this also summarizes third-year medical students that were studied in terms of by using this kind of practice, just using art, it transferred to their ability to observe medical pictures, so that, because they notice more and they draw conclusions based on what they see and have good reason to infer, rather than leaping to conclusions based on some top-down processing, just ideas they had before they started that they don't provide good enough support for. So for this picture, they give an example of a student saying before receiving visual thinking strategies training, he wrote, I showed you the wrong picture. Okay, so in this case, I'll read you a different example. No, that one doesn't have the before and after. I'm going to show you this other picture, sorry. Very quickly. You've probably seen this picture before.
Whipping. Yeah, like cracked whip. That's not red roll.
He's the gym teacher.
Physical
I got it.
education,
I got
physical
it.
education, don't
I'm not
disrespect.
giving you much time.
Education is physical. Yeah, it's not that hard.
Where do you do that class?
So
In the gym?
before receiving visual thinking strategies, the student wrote, I think that the boys are playing in a field outside of school and that there are no girls in the picture. That's what the student wrote, in answer to what's going on in the picture. Here's afterward. I think that the boys just got out of school because I see that there is a building that looks like an old-fashioned schoolhouse. I also think that the boys are having recess. I think that they are playing Ring Around the Roses. I think that they are at the countryside because I see mountains. So you can see how it's developed, and with more time, it develop more. That student also, in response to the other picture at the end of the VTS training, wrote, I think the boy is being punished because his face looks sad. I also think he got into a fight because his knees look dirty. I also think that the man at the top left of the picture is a maid, and the lady is the boy's mom because it looks like she is using a sewing machine. I also think that the boy just came in from outside because in the old days, people used to play with those types of hula hoops. I think the time of day is afternoon because the light is very bright. I also think the wallpaper design is a tree because I see leaves. So, it's still very staccato, I think this because of this. However, he's providing support for his conclusions,
He sees way
and
more,
they're mostly reasonable,
and way more details
way more
in the
details.
second to last
Yes.
descriptive.
Yep.
It still shows his bias, it says hula hoop.
Yes, yes, so those old.
Unless that's what it is, but it
No,
sure
it
looked like
was
the
one of
stick in
those,
the hoop.
yes,
Yeah, it's what it
it's,
looks like.
yeah, I don't even know what those are called. What are those called?
I think they're called sticks and hoops.
Sticks and hoops.
Uh-huh.
Like kick the can, what is that?
That was before they had words.
Is that the technical term, Candy, for that?
Okay, so that's just a little evidence that there's more good examples in this, or this is one of the articles I can send you. But it's just fun to read the changes that come over time. Okay, also from Good Thinking, that book that I've quoted a couple times, I often think that teachers are so buried in new things to try that they become overwhelmed and end up trying nothing. I hope that isn't the result here. Keep these ideas in the back of your mind. Sometime during the year, in the middle of a unit, you always teach and always love teaching, an idea will hit you. Hey, I could add a thinking lesson here and try out that activity I read about in Eric's book. My goal is to empower students with good thinking skills, not to overwhelm teachers. So right now we're about to transition to you looking at your texts. And what I'm hoping is kind of similar to what he said, that I almost said today, I almost started out today by saying what now will make a little bit more sense to you maybe. My goal today was basically to teach you nothing new, but to help you organize what you already know. So to take what you already tried to teach, what you know about what has gone well in the past and what hasn't gone well, think about it in these terms, and think about for what hasn't gone as well as you want, or for what you want to try that you haven't dared to try before because you felt like it's likely not to go well. What could you add in? So if you're requiring writing, can you help them by taking steps along the way until they're able to produce good writing? Think about macrostructure and microstructure activities. Can you help them see the structure in text that they're reading, provide structure for them to use when they're writing, which I haven't shown you any examples of that, but it's a next step. Are there pictures you could use more in your texts, or places that you could find ones that would allow the visual thinking strategies to lead to visualization, to lead to comprehension, and ability to produce speech better, language better? Do you have any questions before I'm going to give you a little time with your own book, your text that you brought today, and then some time with your department? But we'll talk a little bit before you go with your department. Yes?
Just, I'm pondering with this, is for the math and science folks, what we have the biggest trouble with students is not getting the information necessarily as much as the story problem aspect of, they can't decode the question.
Yes.
When we get to that point, and it looks to me like you could do this whole process for teaching them how to take a story problem and turn it into something they can
Yes.
get a picture.
Yes.
Because they don't even know what the question's asking.
Right. So to look at each portion of that story problem and maybe pull out words that are similar, do a microstructure type analysis. It depends on if that's appropriate or not. To maybe create a little picture. We didn't do any examples of that today, but it's also a good next step from what we just did with observing, with doing visual thinking strategies. A good next step after students have done that for a little bit is when they're listening to you read a text, they do a little sketch of some part of it. So it forces them to create a visualization. And you can use that in different ways then. You can have them add to it, make a prediction, sketch out what they think would happen next. And that's actually really helpful in biology classes too. So yes, drawing a picture, paying attention to the structure of language, paying attention to contrast words like but, although, even though in math problems can be very helpful. So that's what, I'll come around and look at your text too if you want. But, okay, more questions. Are there more questions before we start? Kathy?
This is more of an observation to be careful about. I know we've got the internet, I know all these kids have Chromebooks, but I'll never forget the time we were watching Bernice bobs her hair, and I had to describe what a bob was. And if you Google images of bobs, well, don't. Okay? And if you tell kids to do it, just anticipate what could
Okay,
happen.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
I'm intrigued now, I think I have to go.
I'm glad I don't know, whatever that is. But, so would you take your own text right now? And I'm going to, it's gonna be,
Keep that on.
different things will be relevant for different ones of you. So you could look at macrostructure using those handouts that I gave you to figure out whether your macrostructure is descriptive or cause and effect or that kind of thing. You could look for microstructure characteristics.
Oh.
But here, think about how they relate to the text. For this part, we're just going to take 6 minutes to begin with. But if you would write something down as a conclusion in those 6 minutes. So write something about how some part of what we've talked about today can be used to inform your instruction of some part of your text. If you want me to give you more specific guidance because you do feel overwhelmed, then I will be happy to come around and do that for a specific subject.
Caitlin, I can do a little bit.
Yes, that would make sense.
Well, in many, many different ways. No, you're spot on actually.
All right, so issue that's on nutrition.
After you just did a whole bowl of candy.
Right, what's your?
I need more candy.
What are we talking about? Maybe something like this, I mean.
One at a time, every
Just writing down ways that we might use something within today.
So basically, the whole point of today is that if you help students to see the structure, the holistic structure of what they recommend, it will help them. So the structure has features, these components, what we talked about today, build up the brain, the causes, above this line, below is microstructure. Microstructure is kind of like the big picture, the framework, in a story, character setting. Microstructure, we gave two different examples of that. The ones I'll just tell you about now are, if you get any paragraph, you can look for repeated words in that paragraph. It will give them an idea of what they're about to do. If they do that,
Whoa,
do it in a combined paragraph.
I know it's some different.
It is. I like
Well, now I know what to bring for your birthday.
You don't even know when they are, they can make predictions. And
I
then
was
when they.
just gonna ask, that was my
Nowhere near any time we have lunch.
July.
Connecting words like but.
We get out and do your half birthday.
I've always been,
And the macro
birthday
structure
is
is
frequently,
and microstructure in session.
The beginning of July.
but I always thought that everybody was celebrating my
Right, yeah, yeah. And the country's birth, right?
Well, after my birthday.
Present state of the
Oh,
world
great,
is here.
okay. July 3rd.
No, I said frequently, so
Sometimes.
actually hardly ever anymore.
That's mainly for all of us.
Depends on when you get out.
Right.
I am so thrown to wrench that you can sound like I have ever been not in school.
Oh, okay.
I would imagine you do something along these lines, that visual. How thinking.
PTS strategies.
Like, just show kids pictures of structures and say like, what do you notice? Like, because I would imagine like, as an architect, there are times when you just have to like walk up to a building and like understand stuff,
We have an
right?
entire assignment called Good Bad Elevation.
Yeah.
Advanced traffic. They need to go out and photograph 6 good elevations and 6 bad elevations. Not just because of disrepair, but looking beyond the quality of the
What is happening over there? Why are we digging over there?
like water, like water, electrical utility lines. They're not digging deep. But anyways, and so what they have to do is justify their
Yeah.
and then we basically open the floor up to the so that's all, right?
Do you sometimes have the kid then like just put pictures up like that and be like, okay, this is good, this is bad, whatever, what do you guys notice? Do you sometimes have the kid then that just gets obsessed with noticing like the minutia?
Their training.
You know, I don't know, wrong. You know what I mean?
I know who you're in.
But like, okay,
Just
so,
getting into the ridiculous detail.
yeah, just for the sake of being like, I noticed that, not so much.
Yeah, I've had a kid go to our
We didn't, we did with everything else.
He would take the devil's advocate as the grade. Anything that the class would come to a consensus on, he would put the devil's advocate for purposes of not not that anybody agreed to it, but he would defend it.
Well, like whenever, like sometimes I'll show pictures of like formations and stuff, and not so much in this context of like what's going on. I think that would be a really good way to do it. But like, they get sort of obsessed with like information in some of them, like the tiniest detail, and then they try to like extrapolate so much from that one tiny detail, but really it's just rock. You know, and you're missing the point that like, I don't know, like when we went into the chat, and we said, okay, go in there and try to notice something that you don't think, that you've never noticed before, right? Because they don't pay attention to anything. And so like, I mean, we had kids who were like, oh, the ceiling's blue, or oh, there's a big stained glass window with a dove in it, you know, or oh, there's a thing in the ceiling that's like a window. I mean, this was like December of this year, you know, like it was unbelievable some of the things that they had never noticed before, right? So that was good for them. But on the flip side, you had a couple of kids who were like, I think his left was slightly larger than the other people, and that probably means that, you know, he's thinking about something with his left part of the brain, therefore, you know, really, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. And so like, I'm imagining like doing this kind of activity, which I was thinking formations too, like what's going on there, that's not happening, you know, there. At first glance, they might look very similar, but they were formed in completely different ways. So I'm imagining doing this, and there's gonna be some kid who's gonna be like, well, that shrub there, the whole linchpin of the whole difference between, you know what I mean? Just imagine that you didn't have that, so I did it.
Yeah, there's always.
Trying to
grow without.
Just support.
It's easier once you're more here. Like I know some of our Spanish teachers saying, well, I can't learn language.
Oh, I have